Halloween decorations triggered my neighbors' claims of devil worship and emotional abuse. They tried to sue me for allegedly harming their toddlers, who actually love my decorations. After the lawsuit failed, they went to the HOA to report me, but we exposed their ridiculous lies about summoning the devil, and now they're trashing my yard every single night without consequence. We moved into our house earlier this year, and this is our first Halloween here. My partner and I both love the season, and since we finally own instead of renting, we decided to go all in. I'm talking animatronics, fog machines, creepy lighting, full graveyard setup on the lawn, themed sound effects, everything. It's not gory or disturbing, just classic spooky. Think haunted house meets neighborhood block party. Kids have been coming by to take photos even though it's not Halloween night yet. We usually sit outside with hot cider on weekends and watch families walk through. It's honestly been one of the best parts of settling in. Apparently, not everyone agrees. There's a couple down the street. I'll call them Mark and Lydia. They're late 30s, 2 toddlers, super religious. When we first met, they seemed polite, but it quickly became clear they didn't like the decorations. Lydia made a few passive-aggressive comments early on, like, "Must be nice to not worry about what this does to children's souls," and "That graveyard looks so heavy." I brushed it off at first. People have opinions, whatever. But she kept at it. Every time she walked by, she'd mutter something about darkness or opening doors you can't close. My partner and I joked about it a few times but didn't take it seriously. Then one night, she actually came to our door. I opened it thinking maybe she was bringing up parking or something normal. Instead, she launched into this whole thing about how we'd invited the devil into the neighborhood and how she could feel an evil presence emanating from our house. I genuinely thought she was joking and laughed nervously. She wasn't joking. She stared at me like I'd personally summoned a demon in her living room and stormed off. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. About a week later, I got a letter in the mail, an actual cease and desist letter from their lawyer. Yes, they have a lawyer for this. It accused us of emotional abuse and spiritual harassment of their children. I thought it was some bizarre prank until, not even a week after that, we got served with papers. They filed a small claims lawsuit against us. The claim that our Halloween decorations were intentionally designed to traumatize their toddlers, that their kids had nightmares and religious fear because of us, and that we were violating their families' right to spiritual safety. I wish I was exaggerating. We obviously lawyered up immediately. Our lawyer was half amused, half annoyed, but took it seriously because, well, lawsuits are lawsuits. Word spread around the neighborhood fast. Suddenly, we were getting weird looks. A few neighbors were supportive and thought the lawsuit was ridiculous. Others started to keep their distance, like they didn't want to get involved. I heard through the grapevine that Mark and Lydia were telling people we were devil worshippers and part of some dark cult. We're not even religious. We just like Halloween. Court day was surreal. They showed up with a binder full of evidence, which included photos of our decorations, a couple of screenshots from my partner's Instagram where she'd posted horror movie stills, apparently proof of our affiliation with dark forces. And they even brought their pastor to give some kind of testimony about evil imagery. It felt like I'd walked into a bad daytime talk show. Thankfully, the judge wasn't having any of it. Our lawyer presented everything clearly. The decorations are seasonal, entirely on our property, nothing obscene, nothing violating city code. We showed examples of similar displays from other neighborhoods. The judge straight up called the case a gross misuse of the legal system and dismissed it on the spot. They didn't get a penny, and we didn't have to take anything down. I walked out thinking that was it. They lost. Surely that would be the end of the drama. Nope. Then, about a week after the court ruling, we got a notice in our mailbox from the HOA. It was a generic community update letter, but buried inside was a line about upcoming discussions regarding seasonal decoration guidelines. It didn't take a genius to figure out who was behind it. Nobody had complained in previous years. Several other houses have pumpkins, skeletons, and lights. And suddenly, this is a topic? Yeah, right. Not long after, a neighbor I'd chatted with a few times while walking my dog pulled me aside. She told me that Lydia, the wife, and Mark had been going door to door trying to get people to sign a petition to ban demonic displays. Their wording, not mine. She said they'd been telling people that our house was a spiritual threat to the community and that the HOA could legally force us to take everything down if enough signatures were collected. Apparently they were waving around Bible verses and photos of our decorations like evidence in a courtroom. This neighbor thought the whole thing was ridiculous and refused to sign. A few others apparently told them to get lost, but some people, especially older residents who don't like drama, signed just to avoid confrontation. One guy down the street literally told them, "Sure, whatever," just to end the conversation, and they counted it as full support. So by the time the HOA board announced a meeting to address community concerns, Lydia and Mark had a stack of signatures and were acting like they were leading a moral crusade. The meeting was something else. I'd never been to one before, and I didn't realize how theatrical these things could get. The board set up in the community center, and around 30 people showed up. A mix of curious neighbors, bored retirees, and the usual HOA busybodies. Lydia and Mark came in like they were presenting a court case. I'm not exaggerating, they actually brought a projector. They had a slideshow titled "Protecting Our Children from Darkness," complete with dramatic fades and stock images of angels versus demons. They showed pictures of our decorations and acted like we'd set up some satanic ritual ground. They even had a clip of their toddlers crying, except anyone with eyes could tell it wasn't from fear. It looked like one of those typical toddler meltdowns. Nothing to do with decorations, but they'd slapped eerie music over it to make it look sinister. They quoted Bible passages, talked about demonic portals, and said they were standing up for the safety of innocent souls. It was genuinely surreal sitting there, while my fog machine was treated like evidence in an exorcism case. Thankfully, I wasn't caught off guard. My lawyer had warned me that this might happen, so I came prepared. I'd collected written statements from several neighbors who loved the display. A couple of families even said their kids had been less scared of Halloween because they'd gotten to see the decorations during the day. I printed out the town's regulations, showing we weren't violating any noise, light, or obstruction rules, and I brought clear photos showing how family-friendly everything actually is. When it was my turn to speak, I kept it simple. I explained that our decorations are seasonal, non-violent, fully within code, and enjoyed by dozens of families. I pointed out the misleading footage they used of their toddlers crying showed the original unedited clip, which Lydia had posted weeks earlier on her own Facebook, where the kid was actually upset about being denied candy. That got some laughs, and you could see Lydia's face go red. The best part was when I revealed that some of their evidence was actually doctored. They had a photo showing our red lights looking way more intense than they really are. Except they accidentally left the original in their slideshow folder, and someone on the board asked about the discrepancy. I didn't even have to say anything, the board picked it apart themselves. By the end of it, the board basically said they had no grounds to force me to take anything down. They reminded everyone that seasonal displays are allowed within reasonable limits, and ours were fully compliant. The vote to ban decorations outright didn't even get majority support. But because HOAS love their petty rules, they decided to draft some vague, seasonal decor guidelines to be enforced next year. Things like no excessively frightening imagery and no light displays after 10 p.m. They said it was just to keep things orderly, but everyone knew it was a way for Lydia and Mark to save face. After the meeting, I was packing up my stuff when they approached me in the parking lot. Lydia was visibly shaking, either from rage or adrenaline. Mark stood next to her like backup muscle. She started accusing me of humiliating her, saying I'd mocked their faith and brought evil into a place of worship. I told her calmly that if she didn't back off, I'd be calling security or the cops. That shut them up pretty fast, and they stormed off. Since then, the neighborhood atmosphere has shifted. Some people who were neutral before are now avoiding me entirely, clearly not wanting to pick a side. A couple of the families who had previously let their kids run through our yard to look at decorations have stopped coming by. It's not hostility, it's that awkward suburban silence where everyone pretends nothing's happening while also pretending not to make eye contact. On the flip side, a few people have started being more openly friendly. One older couple came by with cookies to thank us for not letting the crazies win. A group of teenagers down the street offered to help put up more decorations next year, so it's not all bad, just tense. The strangest part, though, is what's been happening since the meeting. Almost every night for the past week, something small has been off in the yard. At first, I thought maybe kids were just messing around, but then it kept happening. One night the lights were unplugged. Another night, one of the smaller skeleton props was knocked over and dragged halfway down the path. Our fog machine was found, moved several feet from where it was placed. Not damaged, just shifted. It's not enough to prove anything yet, but it's clear someone's coming by after dark. And I'd bet good money I know who. I've started locking down the yard a bit more, cables tucked away, decorations secured with stakes, lights on timers. I haven't installed cameras yet, but after the third incident, my partner and I agreed it's time. I thought the lawsuit was the peak of the madness, but this feels like the beginning of a long, ugly standoff. Halloween isn't even here yet, and they're already escalating. Update 1. I installed cameras. Nothing fancy, just decent motion-activated security cameras covering the front yard, side gate, and backyard. I set them up mostly to get peace of mind, thinking if I at least had footage, I'd stop second-guessing myself. Within the first week of having them, I got my answer. The first clip showed two figures, both wearing hoodies, moving around at about 2 a.m. They stuck close to the bushes and tried to stay in the dark spots between the lights, but you could clearly see them fiddling with the decorations. One of them unplugged an entire row of lights. The other picked up one of the fake tombstones, looked around, and then tossed it into the neighbor's hedges. It wasn't crystal clear, but let's just say their silhouettes and mannerisms looked suspiciously familiar. The height difference, the way the taller one walked with their shoulders hunched exactly like my neighbor's husband, and the smaller one moved like his wife, fast little steps, always darting their head around. I brought the footage to the police, thinking this would finally shut it down. Nope. The officer I spoke to was polite, but basically told me that unless their faces were visible, or there was some direct evidence tying it to them, it wouldn't stick. Could be anyone, he said. I knew exactly who it was, but knowing and proving are apparently two different universes. I also brought it to the HOA, since technically the vandalism affects community property, 2 power lines, shared walkways, that sort of thing. Of course, the couple denied everything with wide-eyed innocence. She even had the nerve to say I was editing footage to frame them because I hate Christians. That was a new one. Apparently my fog machine is a weapon in the cultural war now. From there, things went from annoying to full-on malicious. One morning, I opened my front door to find my windows plastered with rotten eggs. They must have thrown them in the middle of the night because the smell was already rancid by sunrise. It took me hours to scrape everything off without damaging the glass. A few days later, someone used some kind of washable paint to draw huge, messy red pentagrams across my driveway. Not scary, just sloppy, and clearly meant to make me look like the Satanist they keep accusing me of being. They even smeared some fake blood on the pavement near the curb. It was so obviously staged that I actually laughed when I saw it, but the annoyance hit hard afterward. I had to hose down everything before work, which made me late. The worst was the fog machine. One night, I heard movement outside and caught the faint smell of bleach. By the time I ran out, whoever it was had vanished, but the fog machine's tank was full of bleached water, and the motor was fried. I don't know if you've ever had to replace a commercial-grade fog machine, but they're not cheap. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just them being dramatic. This was them deliberately trying to cause damage. So I decided if they wanted to play games, I'd play louder. I spent an entire weekend repairing, repainting, and re-upping everything. Not only did I restore what they damaged, I added more. Twice the number of lights, extra animatronics, and new foggers. And to top it off, I hung up a big sarcastic sign at the front of the yard that reads, "Warning, House of Unspeakable Spooky Fun. Enter if you dare." It's ridiculous and playful, but I knew it would make their blood boil. And oh, it did. The very next afternoon, the police showed up. Apparently, the couple called them claiming my sign was targeted harassment. The officers walked up, looked at the sign, looked at me, and you could see they were trying not to laugh. They told me nothing was illegal about it, took down the complaint, and left. Meanwhile, the couple stood across the street filming my house and whispering prayers like they were trying to exorcise my front lawn. I honestly don't know if they were doing it for attention or if they genuinely believe I've got demons hiding behind the tombstones. After that, they started lurking outside more often, almost like they were daring me to confront them. I didn't bite. I just kept adding layers of security floodlights, extra cameras, motion sensors. But the weirdest thing is that this shift in tactics actually woke up some of the neighborhood. Up until now, a lot of people had been neutral. They didn't want to get involved. But once these nightly attacks started happening, people began to realize who the real problem was. So that's where I'm at now. At this point, it's not about decorations anymore. It's about not letting them bully me into submission. And judging by how riled up they've gotten, I don't think they're done yet. Update 2. After the bleach incident with the fog machine and the endless vandalism, I realized I couldn't just keep reacting. Every time I fixed something, they'd come back 2 nights later and do something else. It was becoming a game for them. so I decided to change the rules. I'd already had visible cameras and floodlights, but clearly, they were smart enough to avoid angles that could catch their faces. They wore hoodies, moved fast, and stuck to the shadows. So, with the help of two neighbors who'd finally had enough of watching this unfold, I set up what we jokingly called the sting. One of the guys who lives across from me works in IT security. He offered to help me install a couple of extra motion sensors and a hidden camera system tucked away in less obvious spots up in a tree branch, behind a decorative skeleton, even inside a fake pumpkin that had been hollowed out. We also rigged one of the inflatable decorations as bait. It looked like a standard inflatable ghost, but inside we put a small motion-triggered alarm. Nothing loud, just a silent alert that would ping my phone if it was moved. The idea was simple. Wait for them to come back, catch them red-handed, and finally get footage that could actually be used. It didn't take long. 3 nights after setting everything up, around 2:30 in the morning, my phone buzzed with the silent alarm. I jumped out of bed, checked the feed, and there they were, clear as day, both of them. No hoodies this time, just dark clothes. The husband had a box cutter in his hand and was crouched down next to the inflatable, clearly about to slice it open. The wife stood a little further back, holding a flashlight against her chest like she thought she was being subtle. I didn't go outside this time. I called the non-emergency police line and told them we had active vandalism happening on camera. 2 officers arrived surprisingly quickly, maybe because they'd already had multiple reports from me in the past weeks. They caught them still in my yard. The couple froze like deer in headlights. There wasn't any dramatic chase, just pure, awkward, caught-in-the-act silence. For the first time, I had actual evidence that met the police's clear face, clear act standard. Between the hidden camera footage, the alarm, and the officers physically seeing them on my property with tools, it was airtight. The husband tried to mumble something about protecting the neighborhood from evil symbols, but the officers weren't interested in his sermon. They issued citations for trespassing and property damage, and told them both to leave immediately. The next morning, I filed a formal complaint with the HOA, including the footage, the police report, and a full timeline of every incident leading up to this. I attached screenshots, dates, and even neighbor statements. By now, people had stopped tiptoeing around. The couple's behavior had been too obvious for too long, and catching them like this basically confirmed everything. That evening, the HOA announced an emergency meeting to address recent vandalism and neighborhood misconduct. Word spread fast through the group chat. Pretty much everyone showed up, including the couple. You could feel the tension the moment they walked in. Normally, these meetings are painfully boring arguments about lawn heights or mailbox colors, but this one felt like a showdown. I didn't even need to speak much. The HOA chairperson played the footage on a projector. There was the husband, crouched over my inflatable with a box cutter. There was the wife, clearly acting as lookout. Then the officers arriving. You could hear the entire room let out a collective, "Oh!" Some people actually laughed not because it was funny, but because it was just so blatant. The couple tried to spin it. The wife started crying, saying I entrapped them and that I was threatening their family with demonic forces. The husband started quoting random Bible verses at the board members. It was surreal. He slammed his fist on the table at one point, yelling about righteous judgment. A few of the board members just stared at him like he'd grown a second head. Then, one of my neighbors stood up and said, "Actually, they stole decorations from my porch last year, but I never reported it because I didn't want trouble." Another chimed in with a story about the couple putting anonymous repent notes in their mailbox. Someone else mentioned they'd been harassed at a block party about letting their children play near the devil house. One by one, people started sharing little incidents they'd brushed off at the time. It was like the floodgates opened. The HOA board ended up voting to issue them formal violations for harassment and vandalism under community rules. It's not the same as a criminal conviction, but it carries fines and can affect their standing in the neighborhood. They were also barred from approaching my property again without risking escalation of the police matter. Halloween is right around the corner now, and for the first time in a month, my yard has stayed untouched for more than a week. The decorations are still up, the cameras are still rolling, and the ghost inflatable is back in the same spot. Final update. It's been a while since everything went down, and after the HOA meeting where they got exposed, the couple pretty much went into full meltdown mode. Overnight, their house went from fully decorated with Christian signs and Bible quotes in the windows to completely bare. No pumpkins, no lights, nothing. Their front lawn, which they usually kept spotless, started looking unkempt. For a couple who made a huge deal about protecting the neighborhood's spiritual purity, it was almost eerie how fast they withdrew. They tried to regain control of the narrative on Nextdoor, which I didn't even use until neighbors started sending me screenshots. They made this long, unhinged post accusing me of running a satanic cult event and tricking the community with fake evidence. They called the footage from the sting digitally manipulated and said the HOA had been infiltrated by demons. It was so over the top that most people either ignored it or mocked it. One guy commented, "Then why were you on his lawn with a knife at 2 a.m.?" which pretty much shut the thread down. They got slapped with fines for the vandalism, plus they now have to pay back the damage they caused to my fog machine, inflatables, and siding. I filed through small claims court and won fairly easily since the footage and police report were clear. It wasn't a fortune, but it covered the repairs and then some. The funniest part, they tried to countersue for emotional distress caused by the decorations. Again, the judge didn't even let them finish. He literally said, "We've been here before," and dismissed it. The social fallout hit them harder than anything legal. For years they'd run these neighborhood prayer groups, hosted potlucks, and acted like they were the moral compass of the street. After getting caught, nobody wanted to associate with them. At the next HOA meeting, they sat in the back corner, didn't speak, and left early. The board members they used to butter up avoided eye contact. Even the usually oblivious elderly couple across the road started referring to them as the devil people, which honestly still makes me laugh. Halloween came and went. This time, my yard stayed intact the entire night. I left the decorations up for an extra week out of sheer spite. We got a record number of trick-or-treaters too, I think, partly because people wanted to show support, and partly because the drama had made my house the one to see. A few neighbors who had kept their distance before came by to say they were sorry for not stepping in earlier. One guy brought over a pack of beers and said, "I didn't realize how nuts they were until I saw them screaming scripture at a fog machine." Then, about a month after Halloween, a for sale sign went up in their yard. No big announcement, just quietly planted one morning. Word travels fast here, so of course everyone speculated. The popular theory is they're moving to a more religious community, where their antics might actually be welcomed instead of ridiculed. I don't know if that's true, but a pending sticker went up recently, so it looks like they're actually going through with it. That's the last big update. They're on their way out, the house will sell soon, and hopefully the new neighbors will be normal people who don't think fog machines are portals to hell.